Hey, what is up, fantasy fans? I am joined today with my friend Philip Chase, author of the Edan Trilogy and While Darkness Gathers. How are you doing today, Philip?
I'm doing great, Shay. Thank you for inviting me for a chat here. I'm really excited to discuss the Edan trilogy with you.
Yes, yes. So this will be full spoilers. Have I mentioned that to you already? I want to have like a full spoilery discussion, get into the nitty gritty of the series. So
We're just doing the Edan trilogy, though, not While Darkness Gathers, in case
correct, correct.
anybody
I
who's
have, I myself have not read it yet. So commenters, don't spoil me. But
but full spoilers for The Way of Edan, The Prophet of Edan, and Return to Edan.
correct,
Okay.
correct. Awesome, awesome. So one of my first questions was, how do you feel your expertise as a medievalist colored your writing of the Edan trilogy?
Oh, it's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. And from the themes that I am drawn to the setting, to the way the cultures played out, and the way I explored religion.
Mhm.
Just my engagement as a medievalist informed all of this stuff. Just as an example, in Old English poetry, the theme of life fleetingness is pervasive, and that is something that definitely comes up, I think, here and there in the Edan trilogy.
Mhm.
But yeah, the idea of the religious conflict, obviously, when we think of the Middle Ages, often we think of the Crusades and things of that nature, or even various heresies that were oppressed by the church and that sort of thing. You have in terms of the setting and the transition from one older religion to a new religion too. That was something going on in a lot of Europe in the Dark Ages.
Mhm.
So you had cultures like the Germanic peoples, for example, were becoming Christianized throughout the what we call the Dark Ages, the early medieval period. And in the Edan trilogy, you have an example of kingdoms in transition in terms of, you've got Torland, which is already completely transitioned to the way of Edan, a monotheistic religion from what their ancestors had, a polytheistic religion, which still exists in pockets in Elland, which is the mother kingdom for Torland, and it probably still is a slight majority in the Mark,
Mhm.
especially in the rural areas, though, because that's also something we see reflected in the transition from paganism to Christianity. In fact, literally means pagan means somebody who lives out in the sticks, out in the countryside. Really, that's what it meant.
Right.
It came to mean somebody who was a non-believer, because the people out in the countryside were more conservative, stuck to the old faith longer than the more urban people who converted to Christianity. So yeah,
Mhm.
you had lots of these dynamics. It's just everywhere in the Edan trilogy. My being a medievalist, this trilogy would not exist without
Mhm.
my engagement in medieval literature. So yeah, it's just all over the place. Yeah.
Your mention of religion, I think it was about 200 to 300 pages into Wavy Dan. I know it was in the first volume where I'm going to butcher this description, but the Wavy Dan basically told these different polytheistic these different cultures that their gods were real and they assisted Edan, but now demons have supplanted them. And that I thought that was a really in it probably echoes what's happened in our history with colonialism, like
Yeah.
validating the other religion just enough to have them buy into this new monotheistic
Sure.
theology while also being like, oh, we got to stop those demons that are pretending to be the mother and the father. And
Yeah. I mean, where do you think a lot of the saints came from? They were gods, pagan gods, that when the missionaries came along, said, "Yeah, you can convert and you can keep worshiping, this god or goddess, but it's going to be Saint so and so now instead of."
right.
No, you can keep praying to them, and it'll work out. So there was some flexibility in how they presented their religion, and in the case of the Germanic peoples, they were tree worshippers. They had, the Yggdrasil famously is the world tree, but there were
Mhm.
sacred groves and that kind of thing. And Christians were able to say, hey, we've got a tree in our religion. It's called the cross, and so you can pray to that, so yeah, they were pretty clever in that respect, you could say.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Another thing that I thought your book tackled really, really well is, well, one thing that you utilize a ton throughout all three books is you have stream of consciousness sections. Mm-hmm. So there's where Dayraven first encounters the elf. There's sort of this stream of consciousness flow that happens. This happens again in Prophet of Edan, meeting with the dragon matriarch. It happens with Bagsack's descent. And I thought the Bagsack one was really well done. Like even so far as like his descriptions and the prose from his perspective, you see the deterioration of his mental state through that sort of. And my question is, which of those was the most challenging to write, and which of those was the most interesting to write? And if there's any other examples that you want to bring in, if you have a favorite in mind.
So the first one I wrote was chapter 3 of The Way of Edan, which is where Dayraven meets the elf. That's the first chapter I wrote. I hadn't written. I wrote chapters 1 and 2 much later, and the prologue much later. Mm-hmm. But that I knew was the sort of the inciting incident of the Edan trilogy is what happens in chapter 3 of The Way of Edan, where Dayraven ultimately encounters the elf as they're trying to avenge poor Oswy. Initially, I hadn't actually portrayed Oswy's death. I actually just went straight to chapter 3, but I realized, I need the reader to feel some attachment to this kid that Dayraven is mourning. So I presented that kind of gory prologue. But yeah, the encounter with the elf, I was trying very hard to give the reader a sense of Dayraven's state of mind in that moment, and his increasingly disconnection from his own mind, right? And the prose gets even kind of interrupted. It's very, very like he's sort of leaving us, and we can hopefully sense that in how his thoughts become more scattered and cut apart from each other. And so it's a great technique in terms of writing for conveying a character's state of mind. I think you could easily overdo it, and some people love it. Stream of consciousness, like Virginia Woolf or something like that, and you're a little bit confused when you're reading something like that because you're not sure if what's happening in the character's mind is really what's going on outside. Is their mind playing tricks on them? That kind of thing. That's like with Bagsack later on, descending into madness essentially after having the gift ripped from him by Yoruman, and being turned into a person without a home and without much of his mind, and that sort of descent into madness is something that was very depressing to write. So I'd say that maybe was the hardest one, actually, to just go into that dark place. As a writer, when you go there, it affects you. If it affects you as a reader, you can believe that it affected me as a writer when I was creating that scene, and I had to try the best I could to put myself in that state of mind, which in Bagsack's case was not a fun place to be. So yeah, I would say that was the one that was hardest to write in that sense. But yeah, it's a technique that I wouldn't do it too much, because if you do it for an entire book, for example, which it's been done, but I think some people would really dig it, but I think most readers would probably be like, what the heck is going on here? I'm tired of not knowing. But once in a while, to just introduce that state of mind of the character, I think it's a great technique.
Yes, I agree. I really loved each time it was implemented throughout the series. I like the nuance of when you have this sort of, well, first you have Dayraven's first encounter with the elf and his continual struggle with the elf shard inside him. Yeah. But when you see him sort to slip at the end of Prophet, and then in return, as it takes power, it's growing stronger and stronger. But one thing I thought was really interesting with the stream of consciousness stuff is where Joruman or Yoruman, it's Yoruman.
Either way, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Yoruman, when he takes control of the elf shard, you kind of see how the elf is not just influencing Dayraven was probably influencing the elf as well, because you see how Yorumon's mental state, like, I don't think the elf's initial thought was explode these heads. Like, that was Yorumon's own impetus, and then he's met with all this power. So I thought that they're it's not the same every time you use this technique. It varies for the perspective. So I really enjoyed that aspect.
Cool.
And then bringing up Bagsack, I had another question involving him. So we kind of see with Bagsack and with Erkenwald, two characters that were on the villainous side, definitely drastically different degrees of villainy, but they're both not people you'd want to get a drink with. No. And you see both of them get humbled in a way, their worldview gets turned on its head, and one of them, Bagsack, at least this is my perception of the story, I feel like he did find some redemption after he got that power taken away from him. It felt like a lost limb almost, or even more than that. And Erkenwald, you kind of see him realize the terrible, like, how awful he was, but still at the end he's trying to prove that he is the salvation for Torland. And recently we had a conversation on difficulty in Malazan, and you talked about forgive me, is it Bidalith? Bidithal. Yes. And you talked about the way he was dispatched by Karsa. And my question is, I can tell you're playing with when is someone beyond redemption. Do you think, given time, Erkenwald could have been redeemed? Do you think anyone is beyond redemption? So that's the question.
You're throwing a hard one. You're throwing a hard one at me, Shay. That's good. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I know that I agree with you about Bagsack, that not only does Bagsack end up playing a critical role in that it's because of Bagsack escaping from the dungeon, in his madness, he thought he was fleeing something else, but he actually got out of the dungeon, and he's the one that gave Saren the idea that, hey, you could get in there that way, through that little narrow, channel. And that was a pivotal thing that he did. But also, I think you're right. There is a degree of redemption there for this character. I think what it boils down to for him is that he was so downtrodden and disempowered that perhaps in some readers' minds that created a degree of sympathy for Bagsack. And not only that, but you do see a bit of his backstory as well in Return to Edan, realizing, he's not just this flat tool of the way who's just blindly following horrible orders to go kill innocent people. He, there's more to him, that he was bullied when he was younger, that, he has a story. He's a person behind this. And that terrible loss perhaps is what most creates a degree of sympathy for him. But that even someone like that is capable of bringing some good into the world. It is like, and some people have said he reminds them of Gollum, which I think is great. Because there's another character who you could say inadvertently, but it's because spoilers for end of Lord of the Rings, everybody. If you don't know, I'm sorry, but Gollum at the end of Lord of the Rings is you could argue the means by which the day is saved. He didn't intend for that outcome to happen, but good happens through that character. I think Bagsack may be a bit similar in that regard, where he points the way inadvertently to Saren to here's how you can find Dayraven, but yeah, I think that Erkenwald, for me, does not have that same amount, or does he have any redemption at all? I think it was Dayraven's intention that he might find redemption. But I also think that Dayraven's act, as much as he is a person who is trying to bring about peace and harmony and good in the world, but I think what he does with Erkenwald kind of backfires a bit there. You can't force empathy on people. You can't force someone to be empathetic. And Erkenwald's, maybe he's a narcissist, maybe he's a psychopath, whatever it is, but his mind did not have the wiring to deal with feeling other people's pain the way
Right.
you would need to be empathetic and to have compassion on other people. So his response to that force feeding, in a way, of other people's emotions and suffering isn't what Dayraven really probably intended, I think. It's a tragic outcome for Erkenwald. He is ultimately trampled, and I think it's a sort of cosmic irony there too, that he's trampled by his own people, the lower orders even. I have no idea who this crazy guy is, who's, says he's going to save everybody, and there's a bit of ego there, isn't there? In Erkenwald's final act, that, oh, I'm the king, I'm going to show everybody I'm the king still, because I'm going to save everybody by stopping the Elarchai invaders. Here I am, everybody, listen to me, I'm the king, So there's ego involved there, even to the very end in his case. But I don't think you can force people to be compassionate. That is something that has to come from within. But maybe in gentle ways, it is possible to steer somebody in the direction of being more empathetic and ultimately compassionate, I think. Because in my mind, at least, empathy is where you suffer with someone, you feel with someone, and compassion is where you act on that. You do something to help someone, Would Erkenwald ever have been able to arrive at that? I don't know. He's not ever given the chance. He meets his demise, and it's a. I don't have the. I guess I'm not in a position to say if he ultimately could have been redeemed, but it doesn't happen anyway. So,
I think Dayraven kind of forcing that empathy on him is kind of like an isolated look at what the elf is trying to do for like the entire race of humanity, or for all the races of Jormungand.
Yeah.
So I think Dayraven found out for himself in that moment that you can't force humanity to fit into what you view humanity as, and that the same could be said for the elf. And so I was just thinking about this when you were describing Bagsack's similarities to Gollum. Well, they do have similarities in their like descent, their mental descent. Kind of from a narrative perspective, Yoruman is similar because he, coveted the power of the elf immensely, and if it wasn't for his need for that power, just like Gollum needed the ring, I think if the elf shard had stayed inside Dayraven, things probably would have gone way, way worse.
I'm afraid they might have. Yeah,
because I mean, it was Dayraven's intervention, Dayraven the individual, his intervention that kind of stopped the elf. So it begs the question, like, what would have happened if Dayraven had completely succumbed to the elf, which it looked like things were heading. So I guess Yoruman also has sort of a Gollum-esque.
I would say so. Dayraven's struggle with the elf. Dayraven's heroism, to me, is fundamentally, it lies in his insistence that despite the evidence to the contrary, which is plentiful, humanity is capable of love and redemption. Humanity is capable of improving itself, of connecting with others. And he retains that belief. If he hadn't believed that, he would have succumbed to the elf. He would have allowed it to do its thing, which is fundamentally, from the elf's perspective, let's say it's this alien entity, alien to humanity at least, maybe more in tune with the world in some ways than we are, but alien to us in the sense that, well, let's make it an alien presence. Let's put it out as an outside perspective, looking at this planet, looking at us as humanity, and seeing the destruction that human beings have caused, the suffering, the needless suffering that we've inflicted on our fellow beings in this world, usually in the name of our own comfort and greed and everything else, through a kind of arrogance. You could easily conclude that, wow, this species is really like a kind of cancer on the planet. They're horrible. Look at the suffering they're inflicting on not only other species but themselves. They keep having wars and destroying things, and mucking around with the environment, and all so on and so on. So, in order to reduce the amount of suffering, the easy thing would be to just get rid of this species that is committing all these atrocities.
Mhm.
That's the elf's kind of conclusion in a way. Look at all the suffering that has been brought into this world by this creature.
Mhm.
Wouldn't it be so much better for everyone concerned if they weren't here anymore, right? Whereas Dayraven insists, no, humanity is capable of love. We are capable of connection, of uplifting each other. And he believes that humanity deserves a chance to try to do that, and that's what keeps miraculously. There's really one thing I never explained, which is why does Dayraven survive his encounter with the elf? No one else has, right?
Mhm.
How is he able to contain it? Where someone like Yoramon, who thought he was ready, who was this close, lasts for a few seconds,
Right.
So yeah.
Who did all the research?
Yep.
And I think the parallels between Dayraven and Yoruman are fascinating because they're both young men. Well, I'm not sure what Yoruman's age is,
He's a
but
bit older. I think he's in his 40s, maybe. Yeah.
they're both men that um, didn't really have a mother figure in life, and I feel like with Dayraven, that makes him value his relationships even more strongly. He has immense respect for his father, for Imhar, for the people that are family in his life. And with Yoruman, he has several trysts with several different women, but he never forms any sort of emotional connection with any of the other characters that he interacts with, at least throughout these 3 books. I don't know what came before, but was that an intentional thing to kind of paint those parallels between these two characters?
Well, in Yoramon's case, I definitely wanted the reader to understand this is a response to trauma. That Yoramon's quest to defeat mortality is a response. He has that ring of his mother's that he keeps playing with. It's on his pinky finger, but he keeps playing with that ring, and that is a reminder of his mother. And in moments when he's with these women, he tends to play around with that ring a bit, and it's like he's afraid of being hurt again by losing someone. But ultimately, yeah, his rather arrogant assumption that he has the intellect, he has the ability to conquer death, is a result of his response to mortality and the loss that he suffered as a kid. So yeah, he's in that way. I think he's not a unsympathetic character. We all, if we're being completely honest, we would at least have to think about the idea if somebody were to come to you, Shay, and say, "Hey, I can let you live forever. You don't have to die."
Right.
Wouldn't you at least think about it? I mean, most people would. I think we've all heard enough stories about how that goes, where
Right.
I suspect most people would say, "No, thank you. You can keep that. I don't want to have a miserable, infinite existence."
Yeah.
But I think we would all have to think about it to some degree, and that Yoramon is not. And there are plenty of people who would say, "Heck yeah, I'll take that." I'm not going to say no to that, right? So I think he's a reasonable representation of a very significant part of humanity, that we are afraid of death. And given the opportunity, we'd love to be able to live on and on and on and without the fear of dying, which defines us in so many ways, really. I think a lot of our institutions and the ways we inhabit this world, the stories we tell, are all our attempt to grapple with mortality.
So speaking of those two characters, one a very noble and pleasant character, and then one pretty dastardly. This is kind of a more fun question. If you could grab a drink with any of your characters, who would you pick? It could be a pint, it could be a cup of coffee. Who would you, if you could only pick one of your characters, alive or dead, to sit down and have a drink with? Who would it be?
Oh gosh.
And why?
I think Galder would have been a fun
buddy.
Probably Galdor. Yeah, he would have been a blast to chat with, and he has such a wealth of experience and a zest for life, despite his own losses and grief and the separation he suffered from his love for most of his life. But yeah, he's just a sort of vivacious, fun character. So I'll pick Galder for a pint or two.
Okay.
What about you? What would you pick?
I was thinking I'm gonna talk you through my mental process of trying to pick. I was thinking like, okay, Abon would have some cool songs.
Oh, he would have good songs, yeah.
He'd have good music. But then I was like, no, I don't think it'd be Avon. And then I really love Orvindel. He's one of my favorite characters of the series. But I don't know if he would be the perfect drinking buddy because I feel like he's going through some stuff, at least as far as where the story's at right now.
Yeah.
I would like Imhar, but I feel like he would try
I almost said Imhar. Yeah. Yeah.
He would definitely try to flirt with the waitress, though, or whoever, the barista, whoever brought us the drinks.
Well, early Imhar would, in the way of Edan, that Imhar. But by the time he's in Return, I think he's grown up a lot. So he had to go through some stuff too, and I think Queen Rona kind of taught him his place there.
Right. Yes. Good for Imhar.
Yeah. But he would be fun too. Yeah, he might be my second choice. Yeah.
I actually had a bonus question about Galdor. I didn't know you were going to answer that, but I'm gonna mention him.
Okay.
If Galdor had been tasked with guiding Frodo to Rivendell and to Mordor, would he have done it, or would he have stayed in the Shire smoking pipe weed?
I think he and Gandalf would have got along pretty well.
Yeah. He's honestly okay. Ian McClellan's Gandalf is pretty sassy. I think Galdor's a little bit sassier than Gandalf.
Yeah,
so
okay.
That's kind of my perception of him.
I like the relationship that he had. I think Abin would have reminded him that he's supposed to get this done, and so if Abin had been there in the Shire, it would have gotten done eventually.
Right.
But without the Shaper there, I think Galder probably would have gotten too into the pipeweed.
So you think he needs that kind of pragmatist guiding light of Abon?
Yeah, probably so.
All right. So another question I had was, really just an observation, and then a question leading off from that is, I know you have a love for Beowulf.
Yes.
I've read two translations. I've read the Seamus Heaney one, and then I've read it was called the New Translation, and it was like a kind of comedic Beowulf.
Okay, yeah.
I think it's like Deborah Ann, I forget her name. Anyway, that's superfluous information. But the way that the sort of dragon matriarch was written in Prophet of Edan kind of evoked the dragon from Grendel. The vibes I was getting. Have you read Grendel by John Gardner?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Yes, it definitely evoked some of the similar feelings. So my question was like, have you read Grendel? Where was the way that the dragon was written in there, and then in other works, what inspired you to take this more ethereal type of dragon, less bestial?
Yeah, I didn't remember the dragon in Grendel as I was writing this, but I have read Grendel. I think the more direct inspirations would be the same ones that Tolkien had for Smaug to a degree, which would be in the Volsung saga. There's a dragon called Fafnir who speaks in a lot of the dialogue between Dayraven and Gorsarhad in the Prophet of Edan. It's not exactly the same. There are big differences, but there are some echoes. Like, one thing you never want to do is tell a dragon your name, right?
Right.
And you see that in The Hobbit with Bilbo as well, with the encounter between Bilbo and Smaug. He's trying to get his name, and Bilbo's giving all these riddles about, I'm the barrel rider and all of that. So I have a little echo of that for sure in that conversation between Dayraven and Gorsarhad. But I would say that the source material for Tolkien and Beowulf, so the source material being the Volsung saga, and Beowulf itself, where there is the encounter with the dragon, are the two most important sources for me in that encounter between Dayraven and Gorsarhad. But it definitely, I'm giving a bit of a nod to my hero Tolkien as well with that. But you don't want to mess around, obviously, with a dragon. but if you do, be careful not to give it your name, and also I've tried to feed it all into the whole Buddhist / Hindu philosophy that underlies the magic of this world. Like when Dayraven has that encounter with Gor Sarhad, something that I do, which you won't find in in Tolkien or in the other things, is this idea that for Dayraven, he becomes Gor Sarhad, right?
Mm-hmm.
That he is in everything, right? He has transcended the self and has become part of everything. And that is how he's able to ultimately reach and control her for the purpose of ending the war. But of course, as you know, that results in him completely losing touch with himself at the end of Prophet. And that's a bit dangerous. Yeah.
And he does have this kind of moment in his death as well, where he like becomes one with the earth and yeah.
At the end of Return to Edan, when ultimately Dayraven sacrifices himself to save the people of the Mark and Sequara and his friends who are still alive at the end there. It is a moment of transcendence. It is a moment of becoming one with the universe. And it's not, in my mind, completely tragic.
Right.
In a sense. It was something that I felt was actually, I hope it comes across anyway, as beautiful. And even if there's sorrow, deep sorrow in that, I hope it came across as also something very beautiful. It's ultimately a statement of maybe even about how I feel about death myself, that there is transcendence, that you do remain in the people whose lives you've interacted with while you were around, and what you do matters because it reverberates for all those other lives and in the world around you, even when your physical body is no longer here. So I absolutely hope that comes through in all of that. But yeah.
In my reading experience, I think it definitely did. And also Galdor, in Return to Edan, he's thinking about Arna a lot. I really hope you write like a short story, a novella or something about them at some point. But he's constantly thinking about Arna and what that loss means for him. And even though my perception as a reader is that there is no afterlife that Galdor is going to, but his energy is returning to wherever Arna's is, and there is sort of a poetic beauty to Galdor's death as well. It didn't just feel, like it hurt, but it's like I know that this too shall pass. So those were kind of my feelings reading that those two back-to-back tragic scenes.
Yeah. I mean, I had a conversation so early in my in this story's life. I had an agent, and there was a conversation I had with my agent about compelling endings, and I'll never forget what he said to me is there has to be, in order for the triumph to feel real, like it's earned, that it's genuine, there has to be loss. So at the end of The Lord of the Rings, there's triumph and there's joy, but there's also deep sadness. Like a lot of things that were beautiful in the world are passing. The elves are leaving Middle Earth, and Frodo's never really healed, so there's deep melancholy in that as well. And I think that because that's life. So I was trying for an ending that felt balanced in that way, where like there's good triumphs and life continues, the cycle goes on, but maybe with a real sense of melancholy and at least a moment of silence for those who passed, and those who have to carry on, like Sequara. How is she going to continue having experienced such tragic loss and having given so much of herself in the course of all of this, and out of duty and out of sacrifice to help others, and going from a healer to essentially somebody who uses her power to destroy, to kill. So she's going to have a lot of stuff to wrestle with, as a result of that, and of course as a result of losing Dayraven at the end.
Yep. I agree. I think watching her go from, hands that would heal to hands that were used to liberate her home was heartbreaking in a way, seeing her have to go through that. I have one question, which, we discussed this offline last time we spoke, and that was so AP Canavan, your developmental editor, advised that you blasted Imhar, decimated him, killed him at the end of Way of Edan.
Yep.
So I was wondering in that earlier draft, because to me that Sequara giving Seren over to Imhar was such a beautiful ending. It was the right ending.
Yep.
It evoked a lot of the themes that you were working with throughout the whole series. So what did the ending look like without Imhar? I just have my own curiosity. I'm like, what would the pay like at the end when you see Seren go into Imhar's hands and he sees his sister through her memories, you're like, oh, it was all worth it because this family's reunited. So in a world where Imhar got barbecued, what was it all for?
No, that turned out really well, and I was very happy to make that change because of that scene especially. But yeah, so what I revealed to you, and I am happy to tell people, is that originally this is the single greatest change I think that I did as a result of working with AP. And he had a lot of great suggestions. I didn't take all of his suggestions, obviously. Mm-hmm. He wanted me to make changes to the end of Return that I said, no, I like the way I have it. I know it's weird, but I like it. Mm-hmm. But this one was one where I think he really helped me to improve the story a lot. And that was initially, so the prologue to The Prophet of Edan, book 2, was originally the ending of The Way of Edan. And which is where that dragon scene happens, and poor Njorn is like, holy cow, and the dragons are destroying Palahan and in the kingdom of Adanon. And Imhar comes in with his uncle to try to rescue Dayraven and the others as they're fleeing from a dragon. And in the prologue of Prophet, as it stands now, Imhar leaps up, gets his sword into the dragon's tongue, and gets his hand all scorched as a result of it, and is on the ground kind of in agony in front of the dragon. And his uncle comes from behind and runs over and pushes Imhar in order to get him out of the dragon is standing over Imhar, is going to breathe flames down on him. But his uncle comes just in the nick of time, pushes him away, and they don't realize that they're still alive until a little bit later, until the dragon leaves. But Imhar's alive along with his uncle. Originally, Imhar and the uncle both got roasted, like gone. They were nothing but ashes and bone at the end of The Way of Edan, where that segment used to live. Mm-hmm. So AP talked me into not only moving that section to Prophet, but also keeping Imhar alive. He said, no, this isn't right here. He hadn't even read Prophet yet, but he knew somehow that was not a necessary death. There was enough tragedy at the end of The Way of Edan that it didn't feel right to him for whatever reason. And I thought about it, and I knew the ending. I had an ending already. And I thought, this is going to be a pain in the neck to change this, to revive a character and give him a role in 2 subsequent books. But I thought of that ending, and I thought, you know what? That's going to work a lot better. So I actually said, wait, no, there's a character that used to exist in The Prophet of Edan that I had introduced in Prophet, who no longer exists because I gave Imhar his role. It actually worked out pretty well. This character was a new POV. He was a young soldier, a bit younger than Imhar, but basically whatever happens to Imhar in Prophet had happened to this character. Mm-hmm. And I basically said, no, I think I can and he was Adanese like Imhar and everything. I just shifted. I made him Imhar. I had to change things here and there, but it worked really well. It worked really elegantly. And then I was able to bring Imhar into Return, where he doesn't play a huge role, but he's there. And there's that scene at the end where things come full circle, where that promise that Dayraven made early in The Way of Edan is able to be fulfilled, in the sense that Saren, at least, not the sister, but the niece, is reunited with Imhar there.
Mhm.
And Dayraven, I feel like it was present there too in that moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, so in the original Return to Edan ending, though, it wasn't Imhar, it was Saren's brother who survived. Her brother Alan, her half brother. I don't know if you remember him, but he was early on,
Yes.
and yeah, so he's in Return.
He was part of
The rebellion.
the Caergillion rebellion, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yep. He was part of the Cargillies rebellion against the occupation of Cargillion by the Torlanders.
Mhm.
And he initially survived that battle that he was in and gets reunited with Saren at the end. But I changed that up and made that Imhar, and I killed off poor Alan.
Yeah.
Which, who can, I mean, obviously Saren cares, we care, but it was much less impactful than
Right.
than Imhar's demise. And I think it worked out really well to have Imhar be there for Saren at the end. I think that was a really key part of the ending. That I guess I have kind of like multiple endings there. I have, there's the resolution in Torhelm where the Ilarkai are turned into a zombie army essentially, and
Right.
talked into leaving. And then
Infected.
there's the resolution in the Mark where Dayraven makes a sacrifice, and then there's Sequara making her journey with Saren and Imhar and all of that. So yeah,
I definitely think. I mean, I never read the original version. I think that was the right call because there's a lot of fantasy nowadays where it's like the thing is to subvert expectations. I mean, that it's ubiquitous within literature, but people want to subvert expectations. But I have found that you need to still deliver on those promises, and the expectation was that that's laid out in Way of Edan is that Imhar and Dayraven are going to find Imhar's sister. Yep. Now you subverted that did not happen, but I think the payoff of Imhar finding Seren made that journey, even though it was subverted, it made that goal still matter.
I think it was fulfilled in a way that actually turned out to be pretty beautiful. So yeah,
I have another question. You've mentioned before your influence. You were influenced by J.R.R. Tolkien.
Oh, yes.
And one scene that, while being very different, the lore and the myth behind it is very different. It kind of evoked a memory. It brought back a memory of me reading Fellowship and Aragorn at the campfire. He is recounting Beren and Luthien.
Oh,
and
yes.
There's a point in book 1 in Way of Edan where Abon is recounting the tale of Wilfar and Elfshin.
Yes.
Elfshin.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, the more because I went back and read it before this interview because I knew I wanted to talk about that one, and I'm like, okay, well, actually, it's much more of a tragedy than Beren and Luthien. I feel like it almost has more in common with Children of Húrin. But
yeah.
With the tragedy of how that played out, but that story, I felt I'd be interested to know where at in the story's development did that specific piece of lore come along, and how did you use that to foreshadow some of the more tragic outcomes for our characters?
Yeah, that was pretty early on in I knew that I was going to have bardic poetry that modeled after Old English poetry in the series, because I love writing imitation Old English poetry, which alliterates. The every line has 4 stresses, and the first 3 lines alliterate. So that's what I do in there, and I love writing that stuff. And of course, there are echoes of themes, and there's foreshadowing I'm able to do with those bardic songs. There's all kinds of stuff that I have fun with there. I included the story of Wilfar and Elfshin as a wrinkle on the theme of exile. Initially, my idea was that Dayraven has found himself in exile because of his encounter with the elf, and there are various exiles that he meets along the way, like Norn and Hawk, right, for example. And this is just another introduction of that theme of exile and how important identity is in terms of, exile and identity, right? So your identity, especially in these older cultures, comes from your belonging to a certain group of people. You think of yourself as, I'm one of the, I'm from the Mark, I'm from Kinsford, or and still we have nations and states and towns that we belong to, families and whatnot. But back then it was really important. It was everything. Your whole identity was wrapped around you belonging to this tribe or to this group of people. So exile was worse than death. It's one of the worst things that could happen to you, because you have this sort of lonely, haunted existence. You're peopleless. You're identityless. So that's worse than death, right? That's something you see a lot in Old English poetry. It's all over the place. So I wanted to explore how important identity is and how Alfshene's identity survives years of exile, in the sense that when Wilfar arrives at her, this where she was his childhood sweetheart, and she was kidnapped by these Ilarchai, and finally, years and years later, like whatever it is, 16 whatever years later, he is able to track her down, along with one friend who survived that earlier expedition, to track her down. And in the moment when she realizes who he is, her whole identity comes flooding back. Like, she had adjusted, obviously, she had adjusted to this life in a place where she didn't grow up. She was forcefully married to this chieftain, had a kid with him, probably loved her son dearly, named him Wilfar, which she named him after her childhood sweetheart. So she did assert her identity there to that degree. But when when she realizes who this person is, who's just accidentally killed her son, he was trying to kill her husband. You would think she would be she's kind of torn, right, between her old identity and her new one. And a person in that position, this is not a situation that you can really reconcile. Like, she is in a way the tragic heroine of this whole thing. There's a lot about Wilfar in there, and he is tragic too. But that is the moment of impossibility. That is the moment when you have a person put in an irreconcilable crisis, because who am I? Am I the person I grew up, the childhood lover of this man who I'm seeing dying in front of me, who just attempted to kill my current husband and ended up accidentally killing my son? Or am I the woman who gave that up and adjusted to this life here in the wildlands as part of this tribe, and in an honored place? I'm the wife of the chieftain here, and it's not a terrible existence, and I have a son that I love, and you see her decision, probably spontaneous, at the funeral of her son, and Wilfar's already been killed. He's out of it, but at the funeral of her son, when he's going up in flames, she grabs his sword out of the flames and turns around and says, boom, plunges it. As she's going up in flames herself, but plunges it into the heart of her husband, as a kind of like, this is what you did to me, buddy. So
right.
This is for you. This is vengeance for my lover who you just killed, and for completely screwing up my life. Right. So it's just this moment of intense tragedy. And almost to the point where you have these two pressures on this woman, and she makes that spontaneous decision right in that moment, which is, that could be a pretty interesting story. Someone could write that book, maybe. So I don't know. That would be a downer, though. That'd be a really depressing book to read.
Would it be? Do you think it would be as I guess just depressing? Do you think it would be as depressing as writing the Bagsack sections from Return, or more so?
Well, Bagsack ultimately does become useful, and he survives, so probably more so. Yeah.
So this was not one of my planned questions, but just out of curiosity. So you mentioned you really enjoy writing in that style, the alliterative, those sort of poems, the song verse that Abon uses. Have you ever thought about doing more long form of that set in the Ormenland?
Yeah, I mean, like a Beowulf style, Beowulf length alliterative poem. Yeah, it would be fun. I don't know if anyone would read it. because I suspect that more readers than not skip over my poems and songs. As much as it hurts my little heart, I suspect that a few people skip them over, just as they skip all the ones in Tolkien. But I will say that
is perplexing.
Yeah,
to me, when people are like, I skipped it, I'm like, no. I got through the prose and the poem was the treat. Like that was the dessert of
the Malazan poems, right? I mean,
yes.
There's a lot you can do thematically. Like I said, I set up things like, so in Prophet of Edan, I'll give you another example where early on in Prophet, or not early on, but midway through Prophet, there's a moment when Abin and Orvandil and Dayraven and Sequara are rescued by the Theos. Or initially they think they're maybe imprisoned, but they're rescued by the Theos, by Volse, who turns out to be Orvandil's cousin. And a little bit later, Abin, he has a history with Volse as well. He'd been essentially kidnapped by Volse earlier, and Volse made him play all kinds of songs for him. But Abin was able to eventually be released from that. So there's a history there. But while they're on the beach there resupplying, he says, do a song for us. And so Abin does a song. And I think that's the one where he does the song of creation, according to the old gods, right? According to the old religion. Whereas there's this whole story of how there was this, and I steal a lot from Norse mythology here for this, but there's this world tree. In this case, I make it an oak. And Larath, it's called. And there's a dragon that emerges from this tree, the primeval dragon. It's kind of like a Tiamat type thing. It emerges from the tree and immediately starts eating the tree. Like it's hungry, when it comes out. And it wants to gobble everything up. It's eating the world tree. And in response, the world tree gives birth to the gods, whose job it is to slay this primeval dragon. And when they do that, they do it by having the chief god, Ragnar, stands in front of it like he's going to fight it. But when it opens its mouth to devour him, they have the strong god with this specially made weapon toss this. Actually, I think it's actually Ragnar who tosses it. It's the strong god Bolthar, who challenges the dragon. And when it opens its mouth to devour him, it's the head of the gods who throws that lightning bolt that was made by the blacksmith god into the dragon's throat, and that blows it up, and then they make the world out of the dragon, right? They make the mountains out of its bones, et cetera, the drill, right? To me, in my mind, that's a foreshadowing what Orvandil does when he becomes Dragonbane, right? Where he takes that spear that Norn made, the blacksmith, again, the weaponsmith, and tosses it into the mouth of the dragon, and ultimately slays one dragon, at least by that means. So that for me, it's like I just had fun connecting those things and like sort of saying to the reader, look out for this technique because Orvandil's thinking about this. Like, how can I do this? And he uses his own mythology in his quest to take down a dragon, so to speak. So yeah.
I hadn't even thought of that connection until you mentioned it. Granted, it's been a little bit since I've read Prophet. I just finished Return recently, but I do wish I had read them closer together because I do think they lend themselves to a binging quality, at least from my experience. Because I read Way and Prophet pretty close together. And Prophet ends in a way where I'm like, oh, okay, let me take a little break and then come back. But I kind of wish I just gone right on through, because there is a sense of finality in Prophet, but Return really, I think you need that final volume to I don't think I should have taken that gap. But I have a sort of more fun question, I think. Well, I mean, I hope that they've all been fun for you, but
they have indeed,
who would win in a fight between Norn and Gimli, in your opinion, as author of the Edan trilogy? You have two axe-wielding dwarves, though their personalities are drastically different. Who would be the better scrapper of the two of them?
Oh, it probably would be a draw.
Really?
I think it would be a draw. I mean, look, they're the Dweorgs, and I use the Old English word Dweorg, which is simply dwarf, and we got the word dwarves from Old Norse. Dwarf is an Old Norse word. For whatever reason, that displaced the native Old English word, which is Dweorg. And I'm like, no, I want to use the Old English word. Let's use that. But they're essentially very similar to Tolkien's dwarves in Middle Earth, right? And he stole them. A lot of that, including the names for almost all of them from Old Norse, from the Prose Edda. So there's a list of dwarfish names, and you pretty much get them all. And Gandalf is, by the way, also a dwarf name in the Prose Edda, which he also stole. So anyway, yeah, I think that the Dweorgs and the dwarves are pretty. I tried to give my Dweorgs a unique history, particularly Norn's branch, as it were, the Dweorgs of the Fernhaus, because there are other Dweorgs, but we don't meet them in the Edan trilogy. They're off in their own hills, fortresses, far away from all this. The Dweorgs of the Fernhaus are unique in that they were exiled from their hills by the Theos, by Orvindil's people, back a couple hundred years before the story. And they've lost their home, and there's this meager remnant of them eking out, just surviving in Ettenstone when Dayraven meets them. So most Dweorgs don't live in cities, and they don't mix with the other inhabitants of Jormungand. But the Dweorgs of the Fernhaus were unique, simply being used by the Torlanders because they can make cool weapons, So, but yeah, so I'm going to call it a draw between Norn and Gimli. I don't know. What do you think? Who would win that one?
If I'm going off of just Tolkien's writing and not the films, because the films kind of makes all of them action heroes. I'd probably give it to Norn just because of how scrappy he is. Like, he's pretty sturdy. He takes some beatings, and he powers through.
Especially at the end of, I think that would have been the end of Norn if Sequara hadn't been there at the end of Return.
I thought it was the end. I was about to be like, damn, that one would have hurt more than the others for me because of, I don't know, him losing his brother, him finding sort of another brother in Orvindil. By the way, one of my favorite Norn scenes is from Prophet of Edan. It's when he basically shames the Thajoths or shames them into like, are you cowards? Like, basically calls them out, and he's like, I am Norn of the Dwarves of the Finwars, and then that was one of my standout favorites.
You quoted that speech in your video you made with the top 10 fantasies and that you had read this year or something like that. A recent video of yours, and I loved it. That is my favorite speech from the entire Edan trilogy. And it's a Norn speech to the Theos. I felt like, this is good stuff. This is inspirational. And it works. Of course, he gets them into, like, not only to agree, but they're like, they're ready to go. So he was the flame that ignited the dynamite there.
All right, I have another question for you. I already have my answer in my head, but if you could give one of your you can only do it with one. If you could give one of your characters a hug, who would it be?
Oh.
Like, if one of because you do some pretty brutal things to them, so some of them might be needing a hug. If you could console one of them, probably
Sequara.
Yeah,
and not just because she's gorgeous, because of everything she goes through at the end there. I feel like she's definitely needed, and she had Norn and Abin and Orvindil there at the end, and that was really important, I think, in their kind of melancholy journey together. And then they have to part at the crossroads, the very place where Dayraven and Imhar met Norn and Hawk. And of course, crossroads being a very significant symbol as well, a place of change. That for Sequara to have gone through what she went through, I kind of felt bad. I felt like I did some mean things to her as a writer, as the author of all of this. And she was probably in most need. Saren as well, of course, having gone through a lot too. Right. I think Sequara was always having to be the strong one, always having to suffer in silence. I think she probably most needed a hug. How about you? Who would you console with that?
See, you're kind of making me want to change my answer, because I think I but because she's so young, my mind immediately went to Seren.
Yeah.
Bagsack
Good
needs
answer.
one,
Good
but
answer.
I don't have the olfactory fortitude to hug Bagsack. I just don't want to smell him.
I mean, he did get cleaned up quite a few times by Norn and
all of the rotten fruit and spoiled meat. Like, I don't know what dental floss looks like in Eormenland, but I don't want to smell his breath. I don't know how he's getting into those crevices.
Yeah.
But Seren would probably be the obvious answer for me because she's so young, because she suffered so much loss in that third book. But as you mentioned, I think it's because of her age, because, you know, we as human beings are naturally inclined to protect the young. You know, in Malazan, there's that famous quote, "Children are dying."
Yeah.
So that's where my mind went, is like Seren. That's who I think of. But I did kind of gloss over Sequara. Like, in, you know, bringing up Malazan, there's another instance that, you know, while they're two drastically different situations, they kind of echo each other. Is Troll's death at the end of Reaper's Gale and Dayraven's death at the end of the series. They're both leaving.
Malazan spoilers.
Oh, sorry. I'll put it down below.
A little timestamp in there. Yeah.
Oops. But they both, the male character is killed, and their legacy lives on, but we don't think about the mother that has to carry on that legacy and how lonely that is for her and how arduous.
Yeah. So, and Erikson has a character also named Seren, Seren Paddock. And I hadn't actually remembered that when I wrote this. I did write Return after I read Malazan the first time, but I did not remember the names Seren that Erikson had used. I actually took that name from Welsh because I modeled the Cargiles and the Adnese cultures on essentially a Celtic base, which, you know, Welsh with a bit of Irish. And I studied Welsh, so I wanted to use I've always loved the word Seren, Seren in Welsh, which is star. That's where I got the name, is star. So, and I only later realized, oh yeah, Erikson used that name too, huh? Yeah.
I didn't even realize that until as we were talking right now. I was like, oh wait, Seren is. Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't in this case a deliberate nod or anything to what Erikson had done, and I think they're very different characters too, but still kind of cool. That word comes up in The Faithful and the Fallen too by John Gwynne, Seren Disglair, which means the bright star. But that's a different series. So. It comes up also in Warlord Chronicles, by the way. There's a character who's the star of Powys, I think, Seren Powys. Have you read Warlord Chronicles yet?
That's Bernard Cornwell, right?
Yeah, Bernard Cornwell. Yeah,
I have not.
Okay. So yeah, it comes up there too. Yeah.
But I believe your buddy reading that with P.L. Stewart, right? The author of Ground Kingdom.
I've only read the first book so far in it. Yeah, and loved it. Yeah.
Okay. That's got to be one I add to the list.
Yep.
And I guess kind of my closing question, and you can share as much as you'd like, but after finishing While Darkness Gathers, which I have still not read, hope to get to it in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Cool.
And hopefully we can chat on that.
Absolutely. Love to.
Do you feel yourself called, as things stand currently, do you feel yourself called more towards the times and events and the lore preceding the Edan trilogy, or do you feel called to more what comes after? Where are your interests kind of aimed at right now as a creator?
So both. I'm cheating here. In fact, the next story I'm writing is a prequel that takes place 60 years before the Edan trilogy. 60 years or so. And a certain character, a certain great aunt, is going to be a central character in that. So that is in the works. I haven't gotten very far at all with it, but that is my next book. And then my plan is right now, in my head at least, is to go back to the characters, the newer characters that I've written about in While Darkness Gathers, and write some books with them, maybe a few years after While Darkness Gathers when they're a bit older. But yeah, that's the plan for the long term. The next book, prequel, and then I want to do a kind of maybe another trilogy, but something a little bigger, so that eventually what I might have is a prequel to the Edan trilogy, which if you were going to read in chronological order, you would read the prequel first, and then you would read the Edan trilogy, and then While Darkness Gathers, which is a bridge between the Edan trilogy and what follows While Darkness Gathers. And so you could even think of it as a prequel to the next series, in a sense. While Darkness Gathers could be a prequel to the next series, or you could read it as a sequel to the Edan trilogy. But yeah, basically, While Darkness Gathers is an introduction to some of the characters I'm going to be writing about in my next series in this world. Yeah.
I will say, Janny Wirtz gave me the best endorsement of While Darkness Gathers. I think the way she described it is coming of age, but instead of the parents kind of taking on a more challenging role, it's more of a guiding role. And it really examines the passing on of legacy. And that's honestly the way parenthood is examined in fantasy. I don't see that aspect of it portrayed as much. So I am very excited to get to that, and congratulations on
Thank you
on getting your fourth book out and the first sequel of many to come for the Edan trilogy. I definitely got the feeling while reading the Edan trilogy that while the story is epic, it's I've mentioned that it's one of my favorite series to come out of the last decade. I did feel that the lore of Eormenland was bigger than just one trilogy. So
yeah.
I can say that I am very excited to read what you have next. And do you have any closing questions, comments, concerns?
Well, I just want to thank you, really, Shay, for first of all even taking a chance and spending some of your precious reading time on the Edan trilogy. I mean, it's just a privilege for a writer to have readers. And when a reader resonates with a story, it's the most wonderful thing. It's very fulfilling from a writer perspective to have a reader resonate with a story and be interested enough in it to want to discuss it and talk about it. It's really very gratifying. So I thank you for spending this time reading it and chatting with me. I'm really grateful.
Thank you. I am likewise very grateful for you taking time out of your day. Is a story that very much resonated with me, and I've been looking forward to this discussion, and it was a pleasure.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you to your viewers as well.
All right. Peace, guys.